In this video, we're going to continue our series looking at the Gin and Juice Shop, which is an intentionally vulnerable website created by Portswigger for you to test out the Burp Suite vulnerability scanner. And this is the third video in the series. So the first one, we went through the introduction and setup and looked at the various features in Burp Suite and got our scope set up and things like that. In the second video, we looked at the most severe issue that was returned by the scanner, which was the SQL injection. And specifically, we used a union attack to retrieve data and also looked at blind SQL injection. Today, we'll look at the next issue on the high severity list, which is XML external entity injection. So, moving back over to our report that we generated on our first video, we have the XML external entity injection was the second issue, and if we click on it, it'll tell us a little bit about it. So we've got a summary, it's a high severity, the confidence is firm, and obviously we know what the host is, and here's the path to the vulnerability. It also tells us some details about it. So in this case, it provided this tag, which included our burp collaborator URL, and the server made a connection to our external domain. We can also read about the background and some remediation or get some more information on it, but we're going to go and have a quick look at what XML is and a little bit about XXE attacks before we go and test them out. So let's go and do that now. So I'm over on Hattrix at the moment, which has an XXE attacks section, and at the beginning there is a XML basics section, which tells us a bit about XML. So it's a markup language that's designed for data storage and transportation, and it features a flexible structure that allows for the use of descriptively named tags. It differs from HTML by not being limited to a set of predefined tags, and its significance has declined with the rise of JSON, despite its initial role in AJAX technology. Entities in XML enable the representation of data, including special characters like the angular brackets, which we can use HTML entities to define to avoid any conflicts. XML allows for the definition of element types, outlining how elements should be structured and what content they may contain, ranging from any type of content to specific child elements. Document type definitions are crucial in XML for defining the document structure and the types of data it can contain. They can be internal, external, or a combination, and will guide how documents are formatted and validated. XML supports the creation of custom entities within a DTD for flexible data representation. External entities defined with a URL raise security concerns, particularly in the context of XML external entity attacks, which exploit the way XML parsers handle external data sources. For detecting XXE vulnerabilities, especially when conventional methods fail due to parser security measures, XML parameter entities can be utilized. These entities allow for out-of-band detection techniques such as triggering DNS lookups or HTTP requests to a controlled domain, and will confirm the vulnerability. So we've got two examples below, the first which will read from a file and the second from an attacker domain. So what is XML external entity injection? It's a vulnerability that allows an attacker to interfere with an application's processing of XML data, and it may be used to view files on the server's file system and to interact with the backend or external systems. Additionally, it can be escalated to compromise the underlying server, for example, through SSRF attacks. So how do XXE vulnerabilities arise? Well, XML specification contains various potentially dangerous features which standard parsers support even if they're not normally used by the application. XML external entities pose a particular security risk as they allow an entity to be defined based on the contents of a file or URL. Attackers may exploit XXE vulnerabilities to retrieve files, perform SSRF attacks, exfiltrate data out of band, or exfiltrate data via error messages. I've moved over to Burp Suite then, so we're back at our scan results, and here is the XML external entity injection in our sitemap, and we can have a look at the advisory. This is the same information that we see in the report, so we've already had a quick look at that. What we're interested in is the actual request that was made in order to trigger the vulnerability. So here it is, and you can see it's actually highlighted the dangerous input for us. That's our request, here's our response, and then we can see the interaction with the collaborator, both on the DNS and the HTTP, although there is no path to issue to be shown. So let's have a look at the request again. Let's see what's actually happened. We have the entity. It has defined an entity called XXE GKXAV, and then it's calling system, and then it's given the URL of our burp collaborator. And then down here where it's supposed to take a product ID, it's given 2, but then it's also calling this entity that has been created. So I'm going to send this to the repeater, and let's go and play around with it. Let me just rename a couple of things just to make this a little bit clearer. So we have the doc type is called foo. This really doesn't matter. As you can see, foo isn't actually used anywhere. but the entity is used, and I'm just going to change that. We could change it to something like exploit, or maybe just change it to XXE so we know what it is. This is the name of the entity we've defined, and then it's calling system, and then this is our URL, and then down here I'm going to go and change this to XXE. And we could also, in fact, let's just test this first with a collaborator. I'm going to go to the collaborator and take a copy of a URL. I'll go back to the repeater. We'll just test out what the burp scanner did manually. HTTP, send, and then we can go back to the collaborator and poll, and we'll see that these connections come in. We can have a look at the requests and the responses, but there is nothing actually of interest in any of these. It's just showing that it is able to make that connection back. What if we go back though and try and do the file things? So we know that we can try a file protocol. Maybe we can just even do it with like etc password, send. No, let's try and do it then with the file protocol. But we get back this message that says the product ID must be a number. If we return to the Portswigger Academy and have a look at the section on retrieving files, we'll see this is very similar to the payload that we gave. So we've got XXE system and then the file etc password. Maybe we would also try a Windows file path, but I did try that as well. We get back the same issue, and basically there is no response. So whatever command is being executed, the response isn't being returned because it wants the product ID as a number. So we could also try and change the store ID, but I did do that as well, and it was the same result. So let's have a look instead at the next attack. The next suggested attack to test out is SSRF, and the idea here is that we can make an XXE payload that will make an internal request to a server that is accessible through the web server internally, but is not accessible externally for us. So that is server-side request forgery, and the example that it gives below has this internal.vulnerable-website, but if you actually try the Portswigger lab, it uses an IP address for a common endpoint for cloud security credentials, which is the same as you see on Hacktricks if you have a look at the SSRF section. So let's have a look and see what happens with that payload. So I have returned to Burp Suite and I've pasted in this IP address 169.254.169.254, which I guess is like a standard internal IP for this cloud endpoint. And I've also put in the path as well, which is given on Hacktricks. So if we click send, we get back this message saying XML parsing error. And actually, I got the same message if we use just the IP address, which is what was used in the Portswigger lab. So same error. I can't see any reason for this. I didn't change any other syntax there. If we go ahead and just update this to our collaborator again, just in case I've changed something else and caused some problems. No, it says product ID must be a number. So it's as soon as we're putting in, maybe if it's whenever we put in a path. No, okay, so I'm not too sure exactly what was different in that URL that we just tried. Maybe, is it the IP address? Let's do an IP. Okay, that's interesting. It's taken a while to try and respond to that, but it did come back with the parsing error. I guess we could try and brute force through internal IP ranges, but I'm not too sure if Portswigger would be happy with that. I don't really see any rules around it. It doesn't say whether you can brute force internal endpoints or files and directories and stuff, but I'm not too sure. So the next suggestion is blind testing, and we've already tested the out-of-band technique to make sure that we can actually make the connection. So it's been detected. The next step is exploitation, and one of the options is to host a malicious DTD, which we saw mentioned on Hacktricks earlier as well. And here's an example. So we've got one that will read this file etc password, and it will exfiltrate it to our server. We need to host this on our server, and then we'll put in the URL of that in the payload. So let's go and give it a go. So I've created a file here called mal.ddt, and I've put in my burp collaborator URL here so we can extract a file. We could try and do etc password, but maybe try something that's more likely to be retrieved, that we've got permission to access it, which is the host name. And we also need to go and set up our web server to deliver this. So I am going to create let me do sudo python3-m http.server 480. That will start exposing this location locally. Now we want to make that remote. So I'm also going to let me open a new tab. I have an alias for qtunnel, which will set up a default tunnel for me, but you can use something like ngrok to do this, or request bin. There's lots of alternatives. This basically means that if I go to this address, it will load whatever's in this directory. So if I go to this address /mal.dtd, then it should try to load that malicious DDT. So Let's try it. I'm going to paste this in here, and then I'm going to put in here mal.ddt, and then we also need to use a parameter entity. So we need to have a percentage in here somewhere. We need one here, and we also want one with our XXE. Let me try that. And it says entities are not allowed for security reasons. Okay, that's not good. Let me try and move this here just to be in line with the lab, but that's no different. Okay, and do we get any connection? We don't. What if we go back and let's just change it back to the way it was. I want to just see if we can even make connections using the ampersand. Oh, I didn't have a space there as well. That could have been an issue. Let me try it again. Okay, yeah, let's take out the ampersand and let's try that. It's taking a little bit longer to come back, but we get XML parsing error, but we do get the connection, okay, and it says 404 not found. Did I call this something else or forget to save it? Yeah, I forgot to save it. Okay, let's try that again. Send. And this time it gets the connection, but we just get the XML parsing error all the same. Let's go and have a look at our collaborator, and we don't get any interactions. So I'm assuming this has kind of been set up this way where we can basically verify that the vulnerability exists, but due to the impacts that XXE vulnerabilities can have, they've kind of disabled most of the attacks that you would see typically from the Portswigger Security Academy or in XXE attacks generally. Unfortunately, I couldn't really find anything else here, so I did try the other attacks like retrieving data via error messages and exploiting a local DTD, and the finding a hidden attack surface section had a part on X-include attacks, which also failed for me. So I basically tried everything in Portswigger and nothing worked. So if you found something that I didn't find here, you can let me know. I did have a look to see if there was like an official solution that I could check, but there doesn't appear to be. I think that they have just made it so that the attacks are quite benign due to the fact it is basically a globally shared lab. Aside from that, I did go back to Hacktricks as well and try some of the attacks on there which aren't included on the Portswigger Web Security Academy. None of those worked for me either. So hopefully we'll have more luck when we get to the next topic, but in terms of this one, we weren't able to do too much with the payloads. Anyway, it looks like the next episode is going to be on HTTP response header injection, so make sure to check back for that, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Thanks.